So as I said, this is one of the most requested talks I give because a few years back I realized we'd really gotten into this mode of win at all costs. So much so that it was at the detriment of the children that we were trying to coach. And when you start seeing things like Little League World Series championships being vacated because the adults decided that they could use an illegal kid, and then the adults turn around and blame other adults. We got that taken away from us because of X, Y, Z. What about the fact that we need to take accountability for what we've done as adults to make it about winning and not about the process and not about the growth? So everything we talked about last night, we now have to distill it. How do we take and create this youth-centered environment but create these championship cultures? Because just because of the things I talked about last night doesn't make me soft, doesn't make me a snowflake, doesn't make me not to want to win. I want to win as bad as anybody else. But we want to create a structure where our kids learn to win in a way that benefits them for life, not just in the sport itself. And so I glommed onto this idea of we want to create these kids that have these little warrior mentalities, these really strong brains and psychological backgrounds so that they can face any piece of adversity and move through it. So let me jump right in and explain what it means to be a warrior and not a winner and how that develops a championship culture in your club. If my clicker will work. There we go. So warriors versus winners. Warriors are values-led and purpose-driven. Winning becomes a byproduct of this fact that the team, the club, the athletes put values ahead of anything else, and they have a shared purpose as an organization. So to denote what a winner looks like is the trophy, right? And so as we move forward, our symbol for what a warrior is the silver fern. There we go. Maybe I just need to be a little bit closer to it. I'll hang at the back of the room. And if you don't know who the silver fern is yet, raise your hand if you know who the silver fern represents. Okay, well, that question will come up here in a little bit. So there are 5 psychological constructs that we can use, and even if you don't have any kind of background in psychology, you can use this tomorrow with your athletes to start to develop a warrior mentality versus a winner mentality. And I want to compare those psychological constructs and show you what the difference is so you can see it in certain athletes, and then you can start to use language, and you can start to use methods and techniques that shift them over to the warrior mentality. The first one is motivation. How are our athletes motivated? Is it internal versus external? And what you'll see with our most winner athletes is it's an extrinsic motivation. They play sports for things that have to do with outcomes. They're really focused on trophies. They're really focused on rankings. They're really focused on something that's outside of them, driving them. Trophies matter more. There's an external voice. You talk to these kids, and they'll say things. I was in a workshop just a couple days ago in LA with a group of soccer coaches, and I said, why do kids play sports? And one of them said, because their parents make them. He was spot on. That's that external voice, right? There's something outside of them. They don't want to take any responsibility for the process at all. And there's a selfishness about these outcome-oriented winners. We see it a lot in pro sports in the US. There's certain athletes who it's about them. And when they're asked questions about, well, what's it look like with your team? You've never been in this situation before. The athlete answers, oh, I've been in this situation. Yeah, you're one of 10 other players or 11 other players on the field. What about your teammates? They think only in terms of them. They talk about themselves in third person a lot too, right? If you switch that to an intrinsic motivation with your athletes, they become process-oriented. The outcome is the outcome. It's either going to be a positive or negative outcome. But the beauty is, like we talked about last night, that's just a road sign telling us keep going or switch a little bit. They don't really care as much about the outcome as they do about the process, about what they're doing during that. So you see these great athletes who will, at the end of a game, the first thing they do is they step back and say, what could I have done differently? What did I do well? How can I improve upon that? They know that the outcome is the outcome no matter what. But what gets them to the outcome is what matters more. And they have this purpose. When they play for a deep-seated purpose. And when you hear me talk about the greatest sports team of all time, represented by the Silver Fern, you'll see it's for a deeper purpose than sports itself. And we see that in pro athletes too. There are certain athletes that just talk a lot about team, a lot about legacy, a lot about even just the pride for their nation or their city or the state or wherever they're playing. That's that deeper purpose. There's an internal voice and an intrinsically motivated athlete. They do things for something inside of them. Nobody outside of them dictates why they play sports. It's something inside of them. And I liken it to climbing Everest because I always tell, my wife and I joke that that's what this journey for me is my Everest journey, because I've done some really crazy things, like packing up the car with 2 weeks notice and driving from Cincinnati, Ohio to San Diego, California. And as my wife put it, because it was her idea, she says, we got to chase your Everest, babe. Let's get on the side of the mountain. And so people say to somebody that wants to climb Everest, why? And they go, well, if you want to be flippant, the original answer was because it's there, right? Because it's there. There's something inside of them that drives them to do the things they do, and they can't always explain it to people, but they have to scratch that itch. They have to do it. That's an intrinsically motivated athlete. And they're extremely selfless, because when you climb Everest, you may be the one that plants the flag at the top, but you certainly didn't get there alone. You know other people were there along the way. And so those intrinsically motivated athletes, even though everything's inward, they understand the benefit of those around them that help them get to where they are. So there's a selflessness about them. They want to invest in the people with whom they're playing. So how do we get our athletes, this is your takeaway, how do we get our athletes to shift to an intrinsically motivated, a warrior mentality? You've got to start talking to them about chasing purpose, not product. They have to play for a reason. They have to have their own reason. There's nothing wrong with taking the time to sit down with your athletes at the beginning of the season, mid-season, whenever you want, and asking each and every one of them, why are you playing? Why are you here? What makes you tick? And then as a coach, you have that opportunity to then keep pressing that button with your athletes. Whatever it is that drives them to do what they do, you press that button, because that's what ignites them. But it has to be about this purpose, not a product. If they say, I'm here because I want to win trophies, then we have to shift that mentality. Let's find another reason. What's something that you can control each and every day that makes you want to be here? I like having fun. I like being with my friends. That's a good purpose. Let's keep pressing that purpose. And so our saying with those athletes is, the habit has to be process-focused. Everything you do, your language has to be focused on process. Speak to them about the things they're doing, not the things they will get when they compete. The next piece of the puzzle, locus of control. Very similar. There's internal and external. But this is not how athletes are driven. It's how much control athletes feel they have over the situation. When I first started coaching, I was 16 years old. It was really hard to prove to the parents on the other side of the field, who could be my own parents, right? They were about that age, that I belonged on that sideline. So it was a very dictatorial process in the beginning. It had to be my way or the highway, because I had to prove I belonged there. But what I didn't realize was I was robbing those kids of that intrinsic feeling or that internal locus of control. They weren't in control of the process. I was. Do as I say. The first time I ever said to my kids, because I said so, I went, oh my gosh, I'm my dad. And the second thing I said was, they have no control over this, right? So what's it look like with an internal locus of control? External locus of control? They have no control. The thing is when you have no control over your athletic experience, when it's all about what your parents are saying or what your coaches are saying or everybody outside of you, and you feel like there's no say in this. I mean, it's youth sports, but somehow it's become adults using youth as pawn sports, right? It becomes this low accountability. These are those athletes who it's everybody else's fault. Oh, we lost because the ref was horrible today. Mikey can't play goalie worth a lick. The ice was just sloppy. I don't know what they're doing with their chillers, but this ice is horrible. It's always having to do with somebody else. They never want to take accountability for what they've done. And they're problem-focused. Remember that word can't that my kids use a lot. Can't. Can't looks for problems. I can't do that because of this. I can't play pro because I'm 5'8", right? They always find a problem that allows them to make an excuse for why they haven't gotten to where they want to be. But if you shift that locus of control, if we start to put our athletes at the center of the process, and we start to, even in small ways, like, hey, we need team values this year. You all are going to come up with the team values. I'll help guide the process. And so when we get into the season, these are your values, not mine. Now they feel like they have some control. And it's a very easy thing to do. Team meeting at the beginning of the season, you ask your athletes, think of somebody you admire more than anything in the world. Think of somebody that you want to be like. And think of one or two great qualities about that person that you really like. And when those athletes start tossing them out, all of a sudden you have this list of all these values these athletes are tossing out. And then as a team, you just decide what are the top few values that you all agree upon matter to you as a team. You circle those, you sign the sheet of paper, you now have an agreement as a team. And so when you get into the season, they feel like they have control because they came up with the values, not you. You didn't say you're going to be like this. They decided this is what they want to be. So you've shifted them into this internal locus of control. They feel full control over the situation. There's high accountability. There is nothing greater, and trust me, it happens at all ages. I've seen it with 9 and 10-year-olds. There's nothing greater than we get to a point in a season where one athlete looks at another and says, hey, is this what we agreed upon at the beginning of the year? They may not say it at 9 in that way, but at 14, 15, 16, they will. I had high school athletes who would turn to each other and say, hey, this isn't on mission. And of course, where'd they get that? Probably because in the beginning we talked a lot about mission, a lot about purpose, so they had something to strive for, right? The accountability is there in those athletes. They're the ones that get to the end of the game and they're not blaming everybody else. They're the ones where you've seen the quarterbacks and the captains and the goal scorers say, I just didn't have it today. I let my team down, but don't worry, I'm coming back strong the next one. Those are those internal locus of control athletes who know they have full control over the entire experience. There's a shared and solo blame, and let me explain this. The solo blame is they will take it on their shoulders. They're selfless enough that they will say, this is my fault, guys. You did everything you could. I let you down. My passing wasn't good today. I threw 3 interceptions. My bad. But the shared blame is, as a coach, how we handle it. Manchester United, one of the greatest soccer programs in the world, in their academy level. The guy tells a story that he's at the academy and one of their top academy teams, just below the senior level, is playing a team that has no right to be on the field with them. So it's an easy win that night. They show up, well, I should say, they don't show up to play, and they end up losing in a very embarrassing way to a team that didn't belong on the field with them. And it was one of those defining moments for a program. It's like, wow, we really dropped the ball here. You took yourself, you overemphasized yourselves, and you way under-respected the other team, and because of it, you got punched in the face. So the director of the whole academy comes walking over post-game and says to the coaches, I've got the post-game speech. So the guy telling the story, he says, I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, he's going to ream them. He's going to scream at them. It's going to be all kinds of expletives. He's going to say, and usually what you hear is, you didn't show up tonight. You let the team down. You let me down. Everything we worked on in practice, you didn't do it. You. He walks up to those boys, and he says to them, gentlemen, we failed you tonight. We did not have you prepared for this game, and because of it, we all showed up flat, and we let them get us. But don't worry. We accept responsibility. We will go back to the drawing board. We will help you get there. Whatever you need, we are going to fix this. Notice the language. We. That coach, that director of the entire academy who had nothing to do with it, took full responsibility and allowed them to ease into, instead of being so pressured by the fact they lost, ease into the idea that, hey, we can move forward, and guess what? We're being supported by the adults who are driving this process with us. And they said that coach that was relaying the story said it was a very powerful moment because something clicked inside those young men because they realized they were part of something bigger than themselves, and they had these adults who cared so deeply they were willing to take the blame and help them get better. That creates a solution-focused mentality. These are the athletes that show up and say, Coach, this is the problem, but don't worry, we already figured it out. I had an advisor when I was in my first master's program. I got to teach phys ed classes to college students. This is the greatest gig ever. I'm out there teaching tennis and softball and golf, and I'm horrible at golf, but the students didn't know that. I just never swung the club, right? But he was my basic instruction coordinator, and the very first thing he said when we first started working for him, he said, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. Our job was to knock on his door and say, hey, and he was a hockey guy, hey, Coach Davidge, we got a problem here, but here's what we've decided how we're going to fix it. And he'd go, there you go. Now you're thinking. Solution focused. Get your athletes to start thinking about solutions. Problems will arise. It is youth sports. They will make mistakes. They will face issues. No kid has a perfect youth sport experience. The problem is, are they going to focus on all those issues and problems and create a dead stop in their career, or are they going to always see those problems as opportunities for growth and ways to solve new things, new puzzles, just like those kids in the growth mindset study that we talked about last night. So get them problem aware, but solution focused. In other words, see it, solve it. They should see every problem that arises, but instead of hiding from the problem or blaming others for the problem or ignoring the problem, they should look at the problem and say, there it is, how do we solve this? And so the habit becomes ownership. Let your athletes own the experience every step of the way. It's as simple as one small question. What do you want? How do you see it? What matters to you? We got to the point, I was coaching those 8-year-old girls I was telling you about with the passing. They were running their own half times. Because I did it with my older kids, and my older kids challenged me. They said, Coach, I bet you the 8-year-olds can do it if you give them that opportunity. It was interesting in the beginning, I will admit, our first halftime, because usually what it is to say, hey, you've got 2 or 3 minutes, decide what you really liked about the first half and something you want to try in the second half. Notice there's no something you failed at or something. It's something you want to try. It's a solution. Because most of them will go, well, we weren't really doing this, so what if we try this next half? Bingo, now we're on a solution. And I'll be back. And so I'd leave them and come back. Well, the high school kids, that's easy. You come back and they go, Coach, we did this and this really well. We are going to continue to do that. We are just dominating with that. But we noticed that if we tried this, we might have better results. So that's what we're going to do in the second half. Awesome, guys. With the 8-year-olds, they come back and they say, we're going to fly in on unicorns. Second half. Okay, well, here's the thing. They're fresh out of unicorns at the unicorn store today. It was a big rush. So, but by the end of the season, these little 8-year-olds were so into this that a dad says to me, he goes, what did you do? What did you say to the girls this season? He goes, mine, she's bugging me to get up at like 6 a.m. to watch the English Premier League games. And when I asked her out, she goes, I want to be ready for our games, Dad. You're 8. I mean, you just want to have fun. And he says, but she is having fun. She's like totally bought in on this. Even better, I'm at one of my games, and you know, you play at parks, right? You got your little soccer field here and the enticing playground back here with swings and all of that. And I'm playing at one of those fields. I got 8-year-olds, and we got the little bench that folds out, and they're all sitting on the bench. And I can't sit during games, so I'm standing up the sideline. And I suddenly realize that it's total silence behind me. Uh-oh. I'm looking across that sideline and thinking every one of those parents is thinking you are the absolute worst human being because you've let those 8-year-olds run 30 yards away to play on the playground and you never noticed. Yep, that's me. So I turn around and lo and behold, here they are. All the girls that are on my bench are sitting on the bench like this. I said, ladies, what are you doing? They said, shh, halftime. They were so into the game. They were so into the idea that they had a say in what happened at halftime, that they're watching the game looking for problems to solve. 8 years old. They can do it. They do it in the classroom every day if we give them that opportunity and that ownership. So don't be afraid to give your athletes some piece of ownership in the process. Like I said, it's as simple as limited choices. You don't have to create Lord of the Flies. What do you want to do tonight? Because that's a dangerous, dangerous question. But you could say, do you want to play A or B? And even just saying that gives power to the athletes. They have a say in it. And when you create that habit of ownership, it becomes contagious, and they start owning as much as they can, including their own process. And that's when you see those athletes that say, what can I do to get better? Or, I let you down, but don't worry, I'm going to fix it. And now they're in full control of everything. They have that internal locus of control. Next piece of the puzzle, mindset. We talked about it last night, so I won't tell the Carol Dweck stories again. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I'll just rush right into the growth so you can see them both together. We talked about it last night. Short term versus long term, right? Athletes in a fixed mindset think about just this season, just this moment, just this game. They don't think about effort. There's a famous picture of athletes who are running sprints, and one is cutting a corner. He wants to get to the end. He doesn't care about whether he's doing it right. I called it the American Idol syndrome. My second master's, I actually did work on Carol Dweck's praise in the classroom and what it does for children, and we discovered that there's that one kid that always makes it to American Idol when Simon Cowell was still there. Gets up in front of Simon Cowell and sings, and he goes, oh, you're rubbish. And they start crying. But Mom always told me I was a great singer. We did that kid a disservice because there was no feedback in the process, no observations, as Peter would say, no observations as to what that athlete or that singer could work on, right? And so we've sort of lied to the kid all the way up until Simon Cowell was finally honest with the kid. Now, in the process there, we maybe could have fixed it if we just talked about this is a marathon, and we're going to get a little bit better every day versus, oh, you're so good, 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 right? Those athletes also seek this one-day perfection. If I can just have one shutout, if I can just pitch one perfect game, as a coach, if I can just have one undefeated season, my career will be complete. Here's the thing about that. There's research done on Super Bowl winning athletes regarding winning the Super Bowl, because to them that's perfection. To them, they believe they are the world champions, the best in the world at football. So if they win that Super Bowl game, they've attained perfection, and they're in a very elite group of people. What they found out was those athletes become depressed. On the plane ride home, some of them are already saying, is that all there is? I thought I'd feel more. Super Bowl winning quarterbacks who fought their entire career, and people said, oh, he's never going to win a Super Bowl. That's the one thing on his career resume that'll just never be there. And finally, right before he retires, he wins that Super Bowl, and they ask him how he's feeling, and he says, I thought it would feel different. Perfection is unattainable. We are human, and we live in a dynamic world where perfection is just not possible. And when we start striving for perfection, all we feel is the frustration over the fact we will never be there, and we get mired in that quagmire of self-loathing. And if we do attain what we think is perfection, we expect it to feel so differently. The heavens didn't open, the angels didn't sing. What's going on here? But athletes who look in a growth mindset know that it's not about perfection. It's about getting better every day. It's about this everyday excellence. I may not be the most perfect athlete, and I may never throw a perfect game in baseball, but I can pitch a little bit better than I did yesterday. I can be a better person than I was the day before. They start thinking long term. I'm not where I want to be, but I've got plenty of time to get there. And for our parents, what this looks like is parents start to panic and start to get that fear of missing out. I had a parent come to me one time, and she said, I'm really worried. My son wants to play basketball this winter, but that means he's going to miss winter training for soccer. He's going to fall way behind his cohort. He's going to be way out. I mean, they're going to get all these touches. They're going to get so much better. He's going to come back in the spring, and he's not even going to be able to start, let alone will that help him make the college team and get a scholarship. And I said to the mom, don't worry, he's 8. Yeah. That's what we worry about. But what I also told her was, it's a marathon, and you heard that a couple times last night, right? It's a marathon. There's plenty of time. And more importantly, there's plenty of time for your son or daughter to develop. It may not be in hockey, but we'll use hockey as the cauldron that helps shape them into an amazing human being that succeeds in something else. So take your time, be patient, and enjoy the process with them. And remind them, it's all about effort for those growth mindset athletes. It is all effort all the time. As Jerry Lynch would say, compete like your hair is on fire. You want those athletes who show up at every practice, whether you're playing games, whether it's a game situation, whether it's a practice, even if it's just off-ice stuff. They show up ready to play. They show up ready to compete. They throw everything they have into it because they know that they can get a little bit better every single day. It's a survivor mentality. What I mean by that is the TV show Survivor. Guilty pleasures. I like watching those shows because of the psychology behind them. There's this woman who goes on Survivor. She's been on it 3 times now. The first time she went on, she was a self-professed couch potato. And she said, I'm watching from my couch, and I'm thinking this is my life. And she's like, you know what? I can fix that. I can go on that show. I can be something different. So she goes on the show. She proves to herself that she could do it. She gets called back to All-Stars. She goes on All-Stars. She proves to herself she can survive it again. She gets called back on Game Changers, 3rd time on this. She is this idol to all these Americans who thought that their life was this sitting on the couch, no fitness, whatever. I don't have any place to go. And she wanted to be an idol just for her kids, but all these people, she suddenly resonated with them like, I can accomplish anything I want to if I just apply myself and take that risk. So they have this obstacle course that's out in the water, and they have to walk a balance beam with their team. And so the water's causing it to tumble, and it's a really thin balance beam, and she can't do it. And her team loses the reward. And you can see the letdown when she's the reason they lose. They're halfway through, and it comes to her, and she just keeps falling off, and they're all standing on the platform at the end, and they're cheering for her, but you can just see the frustration. Days without a good meal, a shower, whatever it is, and they just missed out on the reward because she couldn't finish it. And Jeff Probst says to her, he says, hey, we can stop right now, and there'll be no shame. You've proven to the world. Or you can finish that balance beam, and we'll wait until you get it done. Her teammates dive in the water, they swim over, and they get on the platform behind her, and they cheer her on. And you know, they edit, so we don't know how long it took, how many takes. But she finished it, finally. Crossed that beam, tears in her eyes. And her team's all cheering for her. They forgot about the reward. They got their reward in that moment for her. So in the after show, he asks her about that moment. And she says, and that moment was a complete moment of failure, and I could have stopped right there. But I knew I had a group of people that loved me, and I knew I told the world that if I gave it my all, I could accomplish it. She goes, that is the greatest moment of my life, because I did something I'd never done before, because I gave every piece of my fiber to it. That's a survivor mentality. That's what we want our athletes to have. We want them to fight for everyday excellence. As Dave Brailsford would say, who worked with Sky Racing in London, the cycling team, when they brought him in, when London brought him in, or when England brought him in, he said, we'll win. They'd never won a Tour de France. We'll put an English person on the podium within 5 years, and we'll do well two Olympic cycles from now. 3 years later, they win the Tour de France, an Englishman. And in the next Olympics, they will get more medals than they'd ever gotten before. And everybody asked him, what'd you do? Did you make these sweeping big changes? He says, no, those are like fads. You know, you get excited about it for a few minutes, and then it becomes overwhelming, and you give up. And you move on to the next fad. He says, I just made little changes every day. Because listen, 100 days of 1% improvement is 100% improvement. With our athletes, if we only get so many days with them, instead of making big changes, a little bit every day adds up. Called it the aggregation of marginal gains. A little gain each day just accumulates on itself. So they looked at pedal height, seat angle, handlebar angles, airflow dynamics, helmets, clothing, nutrition, massages pre and post race, sleeping patterns, everything. They got so geeky. They're at the Tour de France. There's two stories, and I'll tell them my favorite of the two because it's got two variations. They're at the Tour de France, and the guy who's wearing the yellow jersey, I think it was Bradley Wiggins, going to win the first ever English Tour podium for England, right? On the nights between the races, they're getting his mattress out and letting him sleep on his own mattress because that's when he got a good night's sleep. That's geeky about marginal gains. Every day a little bit better. I've heard it's pillow, but mattress sounds so much cooler, right? You imagine carrying your mattress around for 20 days through the mountains just so you can get a good night's rest? But that's how geeky they were. With our athletes, we're going to have those who excel really well. We're always going to have those athletes who are at the top of the cauldron, right? And those athletes, it's real easy. Man, you're doing so well at this. Keep doing that. What about the athlete who's trying to get the skill but is struggling with the skill? Most of the time as coaches, I know I did it. I ignored him. Keep going. You're good. Keep going. Great job. What can we do to find excellence in that kid? See, if we're seeking everyday excellence, then it has to do with that kid. It's individual, it's personal, and it's meaningful. Wow, I see the effort you're putting in, and each day your touch is getting a little bit better. Each day your stick handling is just keep going, because you're almost there, and I believe in you. Now we're getting that athlete to seek everyday excellence too. The other piece of the puzzle here with the mindset is values. Reward your athletes for learning skills, but not all athletes are together on that spectrum. Some are here and some are here as they grow. And next year it might be like this. So while they're here, talk about values. What a great pass. Good vision, way to see that pass. Man, it was well executed. Great hustle on defense. That's one of our values is hard work, and you proved it. You're our hard worker of the day. Now what you have is you have every athlete trying to emulate this, but you also have every athlete trying to emulate that. Every athlete can display values. Not every athlete in that moment can display the skills you want them to do, but they can all display the values that you want from them. And those values, those lead to habits, and those habits lead to development of skills. So that's how we develop our mindset with our athletes. We talk about avoiding perfection and seeking everyday excellence. It's as easy as, oh, you got 3 juggles today? Oh my gosh, you worked so hard. You only had 2 last week. That's so awesome. Do you think, I challenge you, I'll bet you show up next week, you can do 4. The kids over here doing 30 are like, whatever. 4 to that kid is the world. That's everyday excellence. Sorry for those of you. I know you can probably do like 8 or 9, right? So the habit is marginal gains. Teach your athletes to look for marginal gains. They don't have to accomplish the skill today. They don't have to be the best today. They don't have to score the goal today, but they have to get a little bit closer. What is that small adjustment that they can make today that gets them one step closer to the goal? Climbing Everest isn't done in a day. It's done over a long period of time. But you know what they do every day? They have to take the steps. Every day, steps, getting closer to the summit. Our athletes are doing the same thing. They're climbing Everest. Don't rush to the top, but make sure they're taking small steps every day to get there. Goal orientation. Next piece of the puzzle is, how are our athletes orientated towards their goals? How do they view goals? Do they have goals? Winter athletes, they think all about the arrival. That's what matters most. When I win that championship, when I get that college scholarship, that's great. They're also glory-based. We've seen it before. I'm not going to name names, but we've seen those athletes who go, I am the greatest of all time. Even that guy 40 years ago has more trophies than me. I'm better than him. Is it about the glory? They don't, when they talk with young athletes who think about the arrival, they have very vague steps. They talked to Kate Ledecky, the swimmer, the U.S. swimmer, and Michael Phelps was another one. When they asked them at a young age what they wanted to accomplish, they knew times they needed to accomplish at the ages they were at. Well, if I can just swim the free in this by 15, I'm where I need to be. Like, they were very clear on their goals. They had data behind it. My son, when he first started playing soccer, first we needed to get him a geography class because he said, Dad, I'm going to play pro for Chelsea one day. I'm going to buy a Lamborghini. I'm going to drive home to see you in Ohio every weekend. I went, that's great. They have not built that bridge yet, son. Right? I said, well, how are you going to get there? Well, I'm just going to be there. I'm just going to arrive one day, right? He had not thought about what it took to get there. So then we started mapping it out. It's what you got to do. When you talk to athletes, don't be afraid to talk to even the young ones about SMART goals. Specific, measurable, right? Attainable. My son going pro at 10 years old, not attainable. My son making the local team because he's worked hard for a year to get there, that's attainable, right? Relevant and time sensitive. I'm going to swim these times by age 15, and that means I'm on my path to where I need to be. Kate Ledecky knew year by year what times she needed to swim to be her very best. And when she didn't get to those times, she didn't quit. She adjusted course. So goal orientation for most athletes and the winner mentality is just about the arrival. They don't care how they get there. They just want to get there. And we sometimes, because we are well-meaning and loving and really care about our kids, the intentions are all there, we'll help them get there by maybe fudging a little bit, by helping them, by giving them too many answers. I did it with my son on his homework the other night. He has opportunities to do his math problems online more than once. And he's got this score of like 40-something. I go, buddy, you can do the questions again until you get them right. Here, sit down with me. And I'm sitting down, and he's answering them. And he gets to one. He's like, I'm done. I can't do it. And I say, no, let me show you. And I start answering the question for him. And he does this. He sits back and crosses his arms. And I see the arms out of the corner of my eye. And I remove my fingers from the keyboard. And I look over at him. I'm like, you little stinker. He talked me into doing it for him. He didn't care how he got to that better grade as long as he got there. And so I was his vehicle. But when kids have a journey mentality, it becomes values-based. They don't do what they do out of glory. They do it out of the values that are embedded in it. Hard work, integrity, right? Resilience. These are the things that drive those athletes. They have a very clear path. We already talked about Katie Ledecky. Their goals are SMART, and more importantly, it is about the journey. Those are those athletes who absolutely love every practice and every game and every moment they spend doing it, because it's the journey that matters the most. Remember the memory case? It was full of memories. And you create those memories in the moments, not on the podium. That's just one, right? And most great athletes, they forget all about the podiums. What they remember are those moments embedded in there, those moments that led to it, that journey. So we start talking to our athletes about it's not what you get when you arrive, it's who you become along the journey. That's my job as a coach. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some, but what matters more to me is who are you becoming and your time with me. How do I send you out into the world, a better human being and a better athlete while you spend your time with me? And if you start talking that way in the beginning, athletes are going to think you're absolutely nuts. Wow, coach really hit his head hard in practice last night. But at some point in time, it clicks with them. And they buy right in, and they get on that bus with you, and they start enjoying that journey. And the habit becomes intentional. You show up every day and you give everything you have, because the only way you get to everyday excellence is if you show up every day intentionally. And as coaches, we make that mistake. We have bad days that have nothing to do with the sports. And we show up, and we walk out onto that ice, and we dump all of that junk on the ice for those kids to skate over. So we used to tell our coaches, you open your trunk, you pull out your gear, you throw all your troubles of the days, you grab all those monkeys off your back, you throw them in the trunk, you close that trunk, and you say, stay. I'll be back to deal with you later. And you go out on that field with a completely clear mind. You step on that field, or you slide onto that ice, and you are there for them. And when they see you're there for them, they're there for you. And they're there for themselves. Intentionality. What's that look like? Because I haven't talked about them, and usually I've told at least one story about them at this point. Golden State Warriors. NBA basketball. People hate when I talk about them. Oh, here we go again. But watch the Golden State Warriors. They laugh. They enjoy it. That one of the words they use is joy. You know what the other word they use? Mindfulness. That's one of their core values. Mindfulness. Pro athletes, and they're talking about, other guys are talking about crush the competition and dominance. And mindfulness. We're going to be in the moment every time we step on that court. And you can see them in the moment. They're not just dominant because they're skilled. Everybody in the NBA is skilled. They're dominant because of the culture they've created, this culture of excellence. It pervades everything they do. When Kevin Durant was asked if he wanted to, why he went to the Golden State Warriors, was it to win an NBA championship? He said, yeah, it's nice. I won't mind that. He says, but I wanted to be part of, I'd never had a family in my life, and I wanted to be a part of whatever they had, because that I'd never had. They had something special, family. I wanted to be a member of that. I'll shift gears, because I didn't tell this story. Remember I said that these athletes, these warrior athletes, are selfless. Do you all know the story of Steph Curry and what it took for him to get to the NBA? You see, all the scouts said, too small, too fragile, right? Weird shot form, no good vision, not smart enough. They said everything they could, threw up every obstacle they could for this kid not to play pro. Golden State Warriors took a flyer on him. He said, you take a risk on me. He took a pay cut. I mean, he was making less than everybody else. You take a risk on me, and we'll build something special together. So he did. They took a risk, and he did. And at one point in time, they win the NBA championship, and he's the NBA MVP. He's finally proven he belongs. He fought harder than anybody else, because some of those guys, Kevin Durant included, they just walked right out of high school or college and said, hey, I'm here, and got the $1 million shoe contracts and a starting role because they were that good already. Everybody already believed in them. He had to work for what you could say was handed to them. They earned it, but to him, he had to work for it in the NBA. He wasn't already proven like the rest of them. So when you work that hard to get to the top, are you willing to share that spotlight? Most winter athletes aren't. So when they lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers the next year, they say, you know what, our team's not quite there. We need to get Kevin Durant. You're Steph Curry. You worked that hard to get to the top, and now they're asking you to share the spotlight with a guy who's potentially better than you. He's going to steal MVPs from you. All the spotlight. Everybody's going to forget about how hard you worked to get there. Steph Curry went on the trip to recruit him. Steve Kerr took Steph and Iguodala, and I'm brain cramping on the third person. They went down and met Kevin. Steve said that to watch them sit and talk was like they'd been friends their whole lives. It was like they'd known each other their whole lives. As a matter of fact, when Kevin decided to come during preseason, they'd go out to team dinners, and the dinner would end, and everybody start leaving, and Kevin and Steph would sit over at another table and drink a bottle of wine and chat like old buddies. Like they were really bought into each other. They get to the finals the following year. Who had the hot hand? It's been a while now. It was Kevin Durant. Steph went ice cold. This is the guy that set the NBA three-point record 2 years in a row. Ice cold. He just wasn't on. It wasn't his time. Now, you proved yourself. Now you're sharing a spotlight, and now he has the hot hand. Most winter athletes, I quit, I'm done. This is ridiculous. I got us here, and everybody forgets about that. Bench me, coach, I'm out of here. No, what Steph did was Steph started getting the ball to Kevin. Steph started telling his teammates get the ball to Kevin. In fact, Steph started trying to set picks for Kevin. Steph Curry setting picks on LeBron James. Think about that for a minute. David and Goliath. Here, I'll just don't crush me. I'll set this pick. Go ahead. Right? He wanted to make sure that if the ball was in the hands of Kevin Durant, they had a shot at a team at winning. It was not about him. It was selfless. It was about the team. And he was willing to give up that spotlight. And Kevin won the MVP. And when people asked, are you excited? They said yes, including Steph. And when Kevin was asked, he's like, we won this together, right? My teammates did this with me. That's selflessness. That's intentionality. That's a warrior mentality. What's really cool is they go into the off season and they can't afford Andre Iguodala. If you teach your athletes to be selfless and care about the others around them and have those values first over winning, it's contagious. So Andre Iguodala, they can't afford him because of the salary cap. Guess who took a pay cut to make sure he stayed? Kevin Durant. And when they asked him later, why'd you take a contract that was like $10 million less than it could have been? He says, I don't know why I did it, but it felt like the right thing, and I'd probably do it again. That's an athlete who cares more about his teammates than he does his own glory. Sorry, I had to tell that story. Let me move on. Competitive nature. To create a competitive nature in our athletes, we have to redefine what competition means. Under the winner mentality, we see the other team as the enemy. As a matter of fact, we see anybody who competes for our position as the enemy. Raise your hand if you have those athletes who just, even their own teammates, seem to be enemies to them. Yeah, I had them. I was one of those. Man, I didn't want anybody to steal my starting spot. They seek the easy route. We talked about it last night. If I'm going to look good in front of coach, I'm going to go play with a freshman today. I had an athlete like that. He said, what can I do to get better, coach? I said, you're a senior. I want you to start playing with the seniors too, because I know what you're doing, right? You're not challenging yourself. You're not pushing yourself. You watch kids at free play, and kids in free play, they'll do one of two things. There's a competitive nature where they seek out better competition, or they realize that they're beyond their competition, so they then find a group of athletes who fit their competition, and they move back over to them. There are also those athletes who just seek the easy route. They'll go find the easiest players to play so they can dominate the court, and they stay right there all day long. Winner takes all. They finish the skill. They care less about the mastery of the skill and more about finishing the skill. My son was a victim of this. There was a game that came out where you could test your soccer skills and then put them into the game, and you got stickers and dances and whatever else, like, Fortnite. Dad, can I have $10? What do you need? For V-Bucks. For what? So I can buy my character a dance. So a virtual character dances on the screen and I have to pay money for that? Son, I'll dance for you right now for $10. That's what you want, right? Oh, Dad, I'll pay you $20 not to dance. That's capitalism, son, right? So he's doing this, and he comes in, and he goes, Dad, I got 20 toe touches in a minute, toe taps on the ball in a minute. I said, that's great, buddy. Apply a little psychology. Do you think you could do 21? Can you get a little bit better next time? He goes, yeah. He disappears. I'm like, this is great. My son's out in the backyard working on his skills, getting better. Oh, man. Yeah, I've got a little warrior. Comes in, he goes, Dad, I did 600 toe taps in a minute. Oh, I got this sticker and trophy. I'm the best in the world at it. I'm ranked number 1. I'm like, oh, no. He was finishing the skill. Maybe not even finishing. He maybe fudging a little bit. He was skip counting by 10, 20, 30, 40, right? Because all mattered to him was finishing the skill and getting the trophy. He didn't think about mastering the skill. There's a fear of mistakes with these kids who see everybody as the enemy. When they see the competition as somebody that can take something away from them, they don't feel that control, right? They fear mistakes. Oh my gosh, if I mess up, I lose my starting role. See? Afraid of mistakes right there. Completely collapsed under the pressure. If I mess up, I lose my starting role. If I mess up, I don't make this team. If I mess up, coach is going to yell at me. If I mess up, somebody else is going to look better than me. So then they do nothing. They freeze up, or they get what I call tennis neck. Look at coach, look at mom, look at coach, look at dad, look at who do I listen to, what do? I have no clue, so I won't do anything. They also want to win at all costs. They don't care how they win. See, winning makes them look better than the people around them, so they'll do whatever it takes to win. That's that athlete, again, running the sprints, and everybody else is going all the way to the line, and he's just a few inches shorter than everybody else, so he can finish first in front of coach and be like, look at me, I'm faster than everybody. We have to shift the definition of competition. Does anybody know what the root word for competition is? Competere. It's Latin. And it means to strive together. To strive together. So when anybody brings up the word competition, you have to think about the fact that competition requires somebody else. And they're not dominating you or besting you or making you look bad. They're making you better. When you start talking to your athletes about that other team, they may have beaten us today, but what they did is they showed us a better way. What they did is they showed us we can accomplish anything. What they did is they sharpened us. You see, great athletes are not made by beating other people. They're made in those moments when they're challenged beyond their own comfort zone to get better, to try to catch somebody in front of them. They cherish that challenge. They want to be on the side of the mountain. They don't want to be in the comfortable valley, hanging out, drinking a soda in their chair. They want to be on the side of the mountain, taking those steps every day. They want to master the skills. It's not about finishing the skills, it's about getting it right, not getting it done. They mistake hunt. You ever see those athletes who, sorry, one of my all-time favorite videos, Bob showed it last night. The guy doing the skateboard, that's a mistake hunter. Every time he did it, right after the expletive, he started thinking about how he could solve it. And right before he solved it, right before he finally did it right, what did he say? I got it this time. He'd hunted every mistake and broken every bone, right? And used every word in the dictionary, some not even in it. But he figured it out, and he got it right. That is somebody who understands the true nature of competition, the cauldron, getting better. And they compete at all times. Again, we talked about those are those kids that show up to compete. One of the greatest speeches ever given in the NFL for an award was the Outland Award. I believe it's the Alignment Award. This guy gets up there and says, "Thanks, Joe Smith," and everybody hushes. He goes, "Yeah, you don't know him." I don't know the name he used. He says, "But I know him. He's the guy that lines up across from me every day. Doesn't have his name on the jersey, doesn't travel with the team, makes the league minimum, but he shows up every day to push me. And every day he fights, and he claws, and he scratches, and he pushes me. Every day he tries to get by me, and every day I got to show up to compete or he will get by me. And at the end of every day, he smacks me on the helmet and says, 'Good job, I'm coming again tomorrow.'" So this goes to you, Joe Smith, because if it weren't for you every day making me better, I wouldn't be standing here. So thank you. Competitive nature. Or the story that Pete told me the other day, says he had a puzzle, and his 5-year-old kid was working the puzzle, and he stopped him. He said, "Do you have a strategy for it?" And he said, "No." And he said, let's devise a strategy. So his son steps back and figures out, how can I solve this puzzle? So he gets a strategy, and he solves it, and finally he works through the strategy, and he gets it. Then he goes to his mom, gives it to her. She can't solve it. He gets it back. Minute and a half, solve the puzzle. Minute and a half, because now that he has a strategy, he can get that puzzle. He goes and he's working with his pro athlete or his national team athletes, right? And he says to them, he gives them the puzzle. And the one guy can't solve it. And he goes, "Didn't you go to Princeton or something? Pretty bright guy." He goes to the next guy, "Didn't you go to like Harvard or something? You're pretty bright guys. You can't even solve this puzzle." He goes, "I don't want to make you feel bad, but a 5-year-old solved the puzzle in a minute and a half. So there must be a way." He says, "Let me ask you something. What could you do right now to figure out how to solve that puzzle then?" "Well, we could go to your son, because he knows how to solve it. We could call your son." He says, "You could call my son, and he could help you. He could devise a strategy," right? "Yeah, and that would help you solve that puzzle." See, that is developing that ally competitive nature. When you're a coach that's willing to call another coach and say, hey, you played that team last week, and you did pretty well against them. What was your trick? Will you share with me? When you're that coach that's willing to say to another coach, "Let's go get coffee, and I'll help show you how I taught my team a really good high zone defense," right? "I taught my team how to run a better power play." And people go, "Whoa, man, he's the coolest guy on the planet. He's shared with other coaches." That's because we are all allies, because in the end, it doesn't matter if you win or I win. We all win when our kids all get better, because that's the point, right? Competitive nature. So what you want to do with your athletes to develop that competitive nature is you shift the focus from win at all costs to compete at all times. Kids, I want to win just as badly as you, but I care less about winning. I care more about how hard you compete. How much do you give to the game and to your teammates every time you show up? If you're that athlete who competes like his hair or her hair is on fire, then everybody else is going to do the same. You're that spark. Please compete at all times. So the habit becomes strive together. There is nothing greater than a group of athletes who realize that that other team is not the enemy, but is an ally in making them better. And that today we may lose, but we get better. Today we may win, but we've made them better, so they'll come back even stronger. Because here's the thing with youth sports. If you teach kids to love their opponent as much as they love themselves and their team, to see a value in the person across the ice, As weird as that may sound in a competitive environment, what happens is it makes them more competitive because the humanity of the other players creates respect. It makes them play differently. And more importantly, those kids will all go on at some point and end up on the same team, end up at the same school. And if you talk to all the famous pro athletes over the years who've risen through the ranks together, those duos that they always talk about, oh, I remember when Kate and I competed when we were 8 years old. We've known each other since we were 8, and I always loved getting in the pool with Kate because I knew it was going to be the race of my life that day to keep up with her. And here they both are at the Olympics now. It's a pretty big win from enemies to allies. All right, so what we always say is all warriors are winners, but not all winners are warriors. All warriors are winners, but not all winners are warriors. Teach your athletes that it has nothing to do about winning. They will win the vast majority of the time if we first instill those values that matter more. Find a purpose, instill values, shape those 5 psychological constructs with your athletes, and the winning will happen, but it will happen in a way that allows them to become better people beyond the ice itself. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather be 1 in 56 in my career, but create amazing human beings who go on to conquer the world and make a change, because they're the ones that decide what home I live in when I'm old, right? Then create a bunch of winners who all they care about is winning, and then they make a lot of decisions that affect a lot of people, and people go, what were you thinking? Because all they cared about was winning. And we see that. Cameras around me. We see that way too often these days. There are certain people that I would follow into battle, and those are the warriors, not the ones that all they care about is winning. So think about that with your kids. And I'll stop there because I'm running short on time. I've got just a few minutes. Any questions about the warriors, not winners mentality? Any questions about the 5 psychological constructs? So here's my big question, because I really wanted the workshop because I wanted you to have takeaways. Do you have takeaways? Do you have something that you can go and use tomorrow? Good. That's what really matters. That's what really matters. Please, like I said last night, use it however you can. And if you do that, if just one of your athletes becomes this values-led, purpose-driven person, then you've succeeded. Thank you.